In this episode, I speak with psychologist and cognitive analytic therapist Dr. Joanna Harvey, who discusses the complexities of motherhood, focusing on maternal mental health. We dive deep into the impact of social media on a mother's individual experience and the emotional challenges mothers face. She highlights the importance of support systems, self-compassion, and understanding the influence of childhood experiences on parenting. This discussion also gives context to the reasons behind maternal rage, understanding good girl conditioning, and the need for open conversations about the realities of motherhood. Joanna emphasises that motherhood is not only a challenging journey, but also an opportunity for personal growth and self-discovery. This episode is jam-packed with value, validation, and real talk. I know you're going to get a lot out of it. Enjoy. I'm delighted to have you on, Joanna. Could you maybe tell our audience a little bit about you? So where you're located in the world and your background and who you're a mama to.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for inviting me on. I'm really looking forward to our conversation. I'm Joanna. I'm Dr. Joanna Harvey. I'm a counselling psychologist in independent practice in London, in the UK. And I'm also the mum of 3 little boys who are 3 and 1. I have identical twins, which was a big surprise. And I specialise in maternal mental health, and I have an Instagram page where I do a very small job in raising awareness around some of the common maternal mental health difficulties and emotional issues that arise once you become a mother.
Yeah, beautiful. And first of all, well done. I don't know how you manage working and having small children. That's amazing. But also, I'd imagine that from having your own children, it has really, and I'm sure that that also kind of inspired you to work in this area.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd been a practicing psychologist for a number of years before I became a mother myself. And I've spoken about this before, but, I feel embarrassed to admit that even in my profession, I kind of thought of maternal mental health as being quite a niche area. And actually, what we know is that it isn't really a niche area. Becoming a mum is a huge emotional and psychological transition for everybody, and many women will experience um, mental health difficulties as part of that experience.
Yeah, so true. So, right now, we're living in, I guess, a very kind of unique time in history in our modern day. Mothers are being faced with challenges that maybe they hadn't been in previous generations. What sort of things are you seeing in mums? What are they sharing with you about their concerns and maybe even fears at this time?
I think, motherhood has always been and will always be challenging across, multiple generations, but each generation does face something uh, particularly unique to them. I think the obvious one for us is the digital age that we live in, and all of the information that we have online and the influence of social media, because we are constantly bombarded with these very unrealistic and very perfect images of what motherhood should or could look like. And I think the difficulty in particular with social media is that you're lured in to think that this is someone's real life when actually it's kind of much more like an advertisement on a billboard. If you saw a billboard ad, you would just assume that it's kind of a model and a very perfected image. But with social media, we have these little windows into other people's lives and start to absorb these messages, sometimes unconsciously, about what it should look like, and it doesn't include any of the nuance or the broader context or the emotional difficulties that people have around that. And I think it leads to a lot of people worrying that they're doing it wrong, and constantly feeling not good enough. And this huge assumption that I hear all the time in my practice, which is, but other people seem to be managing fine. Like other mums aren't finding it as difficult as me. And I think actually they probably are. You just don't know.
Yeah. So true. Yeah. What sort of feelings do you think are emerging from women today? What are they going through?
I think a lot of women that I see in my practice feel very anxious about whether they're getting it right. And, the notion of intensive parenting is a relatively new concept. And by intensive parenting, it's really the idea that you are heavily involved in every aspect of your child's life, and really optimizing everything, and treating their childhood like some kind of project. So I find that lots of women are very anxious that they aren't educating them the right way, or feeding them the right way, or they're going to cause them some really serious lifelong disadvantage because they haven't played with them enough, or they don't enjoy the playing enough, or they're not going to as many classes as someone else. So there's this constant pressure and comparison. And I think, what really happens in that is that we end up missing out on the most important thing, which is like just being with your child. And that's what they want from you. Essentially, they want your time, they don't want a timetable.
Yeah, and I think maybe that is, as you were saying, with the online space that we have now and social media, we have access to so much information. And maybe that's something that is very different to this period of time that previous generations didn't have. And so they were really kind of forced just to go along with how they felt, like what they felt was the right thing to do in any given moment, like what their gut was telling them, whether it was right or whether it was wrong. I think a lot of our parents and grandparents will say, "Oh, you turned out okay," but because we have access, it means that we are, becoming more aware of so many things. But with this can also come the anxiety of, well, if I'm not exactly fitting the bill, or my child's not fitting the mold of that particular milestone app, or meeting all their needs, it can kind of make us feel less sure of ourselves and less able to access our intuition.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. And I think intuition is a really big part of it. And by intuition, I don't mean that you automatically know what the right answer
mm,
is, but it's more about kind of feeling into what feels right for you and your
mm,
child. And there's definitely pros and cons with having access to more information. There's a lot of upsides to knowing more about emotional development, and moving away from punishing and smacking, and recognizing that parents do really shape their children's emotional blueprints. But I would say that the downside to that is that it's mainly women, I'm afraid. I rarely hear men talking about it. Um, become very anxious about getting it wrong, and causing them a huge emotional disturbance. So I think it's good to have that awareness, but it's also made us hyper aware.
yeah,
um, and I think actually, what I don't work with children myself, but I've heard colleagues who do, a child psychologist, said that one of the things that they often see is that parents really want to protect their children from kind of any and every bad emotional experience. Um,
yeah,
and then they aren't really able to develop any resilience.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally agree. There's definitely pros and cons, but yeah, it's finding that balance. Sometimes when I talk with women in my work as a postpartum doula, they're quite blindsided by some of the kind of heavier or deeper emotions that have emerged or erupted in since having their child, and sometimes it's resentment or anger or even rage, and it comes as such a shock because obviously we don't usually kind of connect anger and rage to what it means to be a good mother, often leading to guilt and shame and this vicious cycle. Um, and so there, like, I hear some women saying, "I wasn't even an angry person before I became a mother. I have no idea what's happened." Is this a normal feeling in motherhood? Yeah, could you unpack that a little bit more, as to why we get angry and how it can actually, be used for change and opportunity?
So I think really one of the things that seems to have happened is that as a society, we have this really unhelpful, unrealistic, sugar coated version of what motherhood should be like, or what mothers are. So mothers are always fulfilled by their mothering duties. They find mothering completely natural. They have endless patience, and actually, fundamentally, motherhood is a much more complex and raw emotional experience. So, in many ways, I think that the maternal rage that many women do experience is quite normal, if you like. That's not to say it's not important, but I don't think on its own it's an abnormal experience. There is actually some research that shows that as many as 1 in 3 women report feeling postpartum rage. And we know as well with scientific studies, if it says that 1 in 3, the chances are actually probably there's some underreporting going on in that because people feel ashamed about being angry.
Mm.
Um, and I work with a lot of women with maternal rage. I've certainly experienced my own maternal rage. And exactly as you said, that is such a common phrase. People say, I never knew I could feel so angry until I had a baby, until I became a mother. And whilst I think many mums do experience maternal rage, I also think that it can be the circumstances of that are also quite individual. So I think there's quite a lot of biological factors, neurobiological factors that contribute towards that. Most mums aren't getting much sleep, and our brains just can't function in the same way when we're sleep deprived. And so it is inevitable that you become snappy, short tempered, and actually your brain can't regulate your emotions in the same way when you're sleep deprived. So that's not actually just your personality. It's like you literally can't do this. Like your brain needs food and sleep to be able to function well. And your brain's job is to regulate your emotions. So if you aren't looking after yourself because you don't have the time to eat and someone else isn't this village isn't there providing you with these nutritious meals and you're sleep deprived, it is kind of inevitable that that's one of the emotional fallouts, that you feel exhausted and irritable, and you end up exploding at things that might seem really minor, that if you were well rested and well fed, you probably would say, oh, that's annoying, I dropped that cup, rather than it feeling kind of absolutely kind of infuriating. Um, but I also think there's many other layers to that maternal rage as well. Um, Nothing really prepares you for the shift you experience in your place in society once you become a mum. And I think we don't prepare women for that at all, especially, in modern motherhood. The vast majority of mums are working and have probably pursued a career and have been very independent and been very financially independent. And then you have a baby and you lose your special status of being pregnant, right? Like no one's giving you a seat on the
Yes.
bus anymore, saying, "Oh, you look glowing. You're just this woman with a pram who's probably in the way." And you have reduced income, and the baby comes first. No one's asking about you. They're all interested in the baby, and sure, so they should be interested in the baby. It's gorgeous to have a new baby, but we often neglect the mum. So might be in physical discomfort. You're exhausted. You're emotionally vulnerable. You're trying to look after a baby and you kind of feel invisible too. And I think that can really, really drive anger, feeling overlooked, feeling invisible, and feeling that you're expected to do so much for everyone around you with very little in return often.
Yeah. Absolutely. I'm feeling every word of that, and that's so true. And I often sort of say to a mother, after giving her a description of all the things she's doing, and I say, why wouldn't you be angry? you know,
Mhm.
like if somebody else in a particular role was working the amount of hours that we're working or mothers are working, and without any kind of reward, without any kind of reassurance that she's doing a good job, we'd see a pretty ugly side of them, actually, I'm sure.
But that's actually what you said about an ugly side as well. That's something that I'm really fascinated by, because I think that actually, if when you become a mother, you're shifting into a different archetype, right? You're a maiden before you have before you become a mother. You're kind of young-ish, child-free uh, woman, and you're actually shifting into a different realm when you become a mother. And you kind of have to claim yourself and your feelings in a different way, and those ugly sides, those ugly feelings that have been packaged away and deemed kind of not good, they come to the surface in motherhood. The anger, the resentment, these feelings that have been much easier to conceal before.
Yeah, yeah. And I guess also you're constantly triggered. If you need a reason to become angry, become a mother. Because that is going to really, push you to the limits of what you can tolerate.
Yeah.
And yet we sort of water it down at the same time. I think we kind of dismiss these feelings as, oh, you're just exhausted, or um or it's normal to be a little frustrated, or a bit resentful, without really naming it for what it is. I feel like we tend to water it down with other labels. um, and at the same time, mothers don't want to say that they're angry for shame or fear that they might be seen as not a good mother, a bad mother. There must be a deeper root cause to that, and maybe it's a cycle that you can inform us about a little deeper. Why are mothers to why are we not talking about this more in the way that we're actually naming it for what it actually is, and being okay with that, and understanding the ambivalence of motherhood, that we can carry multiple feelings at a time, and it's all normal, and it's all information. It's giving us information to um, understand ourselves better, I guess. And I'm thinking of the changes you're talking about, and I talk a lot about matrescence in my work as well. And it is a little confusing. We do feel a bit, ruffled in that time. We're not quite sure of who we are, and we're trying to understand and recalibrate. So it can be a bit unsettling, but it also can be a beautiful opportunity for growth. But first of all, before we go there, is there other things at play as to why this is happening and mothers are feeling so guilty and so ashamed about how they're feeling?
Well, as I said before, although maternal rage is very common, it does mean different things for different
Yeah.
people. And as you mentioned, it's like a distress signal. It is telling you something. It isn't something just to, as you say, to water down, just to say, oh, never mind, like all mums kind of feel pissed off. It really is a warning sign that that you need extra support in some area, that there's something that you're struggling with. Um, and it's understandable to struggle, because matrescence is a really bumpy ride. I mean, my children are very young, so I'm still very much in the thick of that. I've not got to the other side where I can look back and say, oh, well, it changed and this is what happened. I'm looking to other people with more experience and older children, um, to help me with that. Um, and I suppose there is a particular pattern that I do see a lot in my work, and you might have come across it in social media. Is this concept of kind of good girl conditioning, which really is a concept that originates from feminist psychology and gender studies, that shows that the way that girls are socialized actually impacts their lifelong behavior and has an impact on their emotional well-being and their mental health. So good girl conditioning is really about how from a very young age girls are encouraged to be good, and what we mean by that is to not reveal these uglier emotions, so frustration, irritation, anger, impatience, selfishness, competitiveness. These are things that are deemed kind of unwomanly, maybe, like not nice attributes or qualities to have. And you're really encouraged to be pleasing to other people, to not cause difficulties, to basically make yourself smaller, to conceal your own needs and put others first. And you still see that now. Like little girls are rewarded for being so selfless, for being so uh, helpful to others. And it's not that those are bad qualities to have, to be agreeable and to help others, but when that comes at your own expense and you're losing touch with your own authentic emotions and your own needs because you're so um, focused on needing to please other people, those ugly feelings that you've been encouraged to pack away, that they don't disappear. They don't just cease to exist anymore. You know, anger is one of our core emotions. Like everyone feels it in varying degrees. And I think something that is quite a typical pattern is that when women become mothers, they are under a huge amount of pressure in a way that they weren't before. They're looking after one or multiple other people, often trying to juggle work at the same time, pretend that they're finding it really easy and that they don't ever lose their patience. And actually, what ends up happening is that these long buried feelings, they can't be contained anymore, and they erupt, and they
Yeah.
feel horrifying. If you have considered yourself to be someone who is, quite agreeable, doesn't have these big messy feelings, is a nice person,
Ever.
is calm, has it together, it
Yeah.
is quite terrifying to be confronted
Mm.
with what has been lurking at the bottom of your emotional well,
Yeah.
and then huge
True.
guilt and shame follow.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, but I think that's an important point to note is it doesn't just erupt from nowhere. It has been perhaps buried or simmering away or contained or hasn't had as many kind of moments where it's felt too much for us. So I guess a lot of women aren't even aware that they've had this good girl conditioning, are they? Um, and they I think they just kind of keep going as if this is quite normal behavior because that's what they've known their whole life. Maybe they've seen their mother being a people pleaser and they've learned so much in that way it's generational. How can a woman mother define what can she look for in herself to see if she's sort of being conditioned in this way, and how can she begin to make small changes so that she feels a bit more empowered? Yeah.
So, when I'm talking to my clients about this, something that I often say to them, and it sounds so silly, but it's such a good snapshot into it. So I say, how many times have you gone out for dinner with friends and someone might have said, where do you want to go for dinner? What do you want? Do you want Italian or do you want Thai? And they say, I don't mind.
Mm.
And people often fall into two categories with that. They either really don't know, they genuinely really don't know. So they say, I don't mind, because they really have no idea. And it isn't actually because they really just don't know. It's because they haven't listened to themselves. the need to be agreeable and to do what other people want them to do is so strong that actually they've kind of lost sight of what they might want themselves.
Yeah.
So it's not a lie that they don't mind. It's just that actually they're really disconnected from what it is that they might actually want.
Yeah.
Or people say, well, actually, you know what? I really wanted a tie, but I still said, I don't mind. Because what would be worse for me is going to a tie and sitting there knowing that my friend wanted Italian. Very few people say, I would say, I want this, let's go for it. And it sounds like a really trivial example, but actually it really highlights those internalized messages and how many women struggle to know what it is that they really want because they've been so conditioned to please other people, or they do know what they want, but they're too afraid to claim what they want because it would
Mm.
feel too uncomfortable to do so.
Wow. Yeah. I'm trying to think out of those 2, which one you would say they're different, but which one would you say would be more problematic as she moves through her motherhood journey?
Well, I think they can be problematic in different ways. I think when people have really lost their sense of self.
Yeah, the one thing I hear women saying a lot is constantly apologizing.
Mm,
Where does that come from? That's is that
I don't
that and
know.
it I
I'm
apologize too. It's sort of like socially acceptable, I think, to apologize. I apologize probably more than I need to. But I've also observed women that are just constantly, and it actually gets quite aggravating. If I'm being honest, I feel like saying, "Stop saying sorry. What are you sorry for now?"
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. It is really kind of that apologizing for taking up any kind of space, for just kind of for being there, really. Um,
yeah,
I mean, I'm not sure about Australia, but I know that it is probably particularly problematic in the UK because we everybody says sorry all the time. I remember a Greek friend of mine saying to me once, like, what is this sorry? Like, why is everyone apologizing to everyone all the time? Someone bumps into you on the tube and you're saying sorry to them. And it's true, it's just
yeah.
like an automatic
It's an automatic
response.
response, yeah.
Yeah,
And
I
it almost
wonder.
lacks sincerity. The sincerity of the apology has gone because it's just rolls off the tongue. And it
Yes,
is a
yeah,
problem here, but I will say that I don't see this being a big problem with men. It is quite unique to to
there are
women
not
and
many
even more
things.
mothers. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
No, you're right, and I think perhaps it's also maybe at its heart, it's an avoidance of conflict, and many women really struggle with conflict and avoiding conflict because, like that good girl thing, it's seen as aggressive or negative when it doesn't actually need to be. Um,
Yeah.
and I think maybe that's also something that plays quite a big part in maternal rage as well as is women take on so much and try to be this kind of super mom because that's the narrative that you're fed. It's like, well, that's what you do. You can still work and have all of your children and go to the gym and do all the batch cooking and make sure you've got a happy partner and book all your kids into the right activities. It's like it's completely exhausting.
But
Um,
heaven forbid, don't have any feelings yourself or get angry.
exactly, exactly. But don't
Yeah.
complain about it. Um,
Yeah.
and and I think what often drives a lot of women into the ground is because they feel like asking for help will kind of show that they're not coping. You know.
Yeah, yeah, and that's another thing that there's a lot of shame around, especially in the Western world. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Or they also don't want to have any kind of conflict because you're really saying whether that's to your partner or whether that's to your extended family, you're really saying like I need you to pull more weight in this situation. I can't do it all by myself.
yeah, yeah, so true. It's very multi-layered. Yeah.
Mm.
Another thing I find very interesting about becoming a mother is the ways in which it often brings to light some of your own childhood memories and perhaps even, the ways that you were mothered. And it also can feel, I guess, very unsettling when that happens. Even projecting on your children some of the ways that you were mothered, that's even more confronting. But where does this come from? Where's the psychology of that, and why does becoming a mother raise so much in our us about our the way we were mothered?
Yeah, so this is something that I really wish there was much more awareness about. Um, I would really love if this was included in people's antenatal preparation, not to frighten
Definitely.
them anyway, but to just to help people be a little bit more prepared for the emotional roller coaster that you're about to go on. Um, in my own antenatal classes, nothing was mentioned about the mum's emotional, psychological health postpartum at all. Um, I think I even had a booklet that when it got to 6 weeks, it was basically like, you'll be feeling pretty much back to yourself by now, just with like a nice little baby in tow. And that it obviously didn't feel that way. So I think something which is very prolific in the psychological literature, but is pretty much absent from the dominant narratives about motherhood, is that your own childhood, your own infancy, really, will also shape your own emotional experience of motherhood. Because, really, on a very visceral, bodily level, your baby will remind you of when you were an infant yourself. Um, and these can be complicated concepts to talk about because they're largely unconscious processes. You're not looking down at your baby and thinking of yourself, but actually somewhere deep down on a bodily level, like, that is what's happening. So something that really emerges a lot in therapy, and it's really one of the big reasons why many women come to therapy postpartum or beyond, even when they don't realize it at first, is that your own emotional blueprint is essentially set up in your own childhood. And when you have your own children, you are confronted with all of their emotions that you're trying to contain, and it really calls on you to be able to regulate their emotions, to regulate their nervous system. But if you didn't have that attuned experience yourself, and many people don't, that's something that is going to feel quite challenging to you, perhaps more than someone who did have an experience of more emotionally attuned parenting. And when I say emotionally attuned, I don't mean perfect, someone whose mother was just, endlessly patient and knew how to soothe them. It's more a kind of a more basic level of containment and safety. But if you grew up in an environment where actually a lot of those feelings, those kind of big, messy, chaotic feelings, uh, weren't really attuned to, or you were encouraged to sort of dampen them down, it's difficult for you to then contain your own child's feelings. It doesn't mean that you can't do it, but what it does mean is that it's going to feel quite difficult to you. When your baby cries, it's going to feel hard. It might feel so overwhelming that actually you lose your temper, not because you're a horrible person or you're an awful mother or you can't cope or you're not cut out for it, but because actually your baby's screams are really triggering your nervous system. And I wish that more people were aware of that. So
Mm.
they were able to kind of get the right support and also have that understanding rather than beating themselves up for just thinking that they're like a really rubbish mum or someone who just can't cope. Um,
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so true. And even myself, my first child was particularly dysregulated, and it's hard to listen to a baby screaming and crying for, hours on end. And I think we are so hard on ourselves because any human would find that difficult. Um, and so we are human too. So it's going to be hard. What are some of the things that maybe we could do in that moment if we feel like we've been, our nervous system is becoming too activated and we're not coping? What would you say some tips would be?
a really common one, I think, it's and like I've experienced it myself. Like I know that feeling that a nap not happening is often like a really big trigger
Mm,
for the feeling that they're kind of like at capacity and going to lose it. Um, and the first thing I would say is to remind yourself that you're not really angry at the baby. It's the situation, and you feel out of control. When people are experiencing really intense anger, the best thing to do is to take yourself out of the room. Like, make sure the baby is safe, put the baby down in the cot. Babies do cry. And as someone who has had twins, my tolerance for crying and the intensity of crying has definitely increased. The baby will be okay for a minute. It is more important that you take yourself out of that situation, try and regulate your breathing. You can do somatic practices, so like shaking your hands out. You can even run your wrists under a really cold tap or jump up and down. And breathing, really simple, but really helps because those intense feelings, whilst they feel that they will completely envelop you in the moment, there is really only one place for them to go eventually, and that's back down again.
mm,
So if you're really feeling you're kind of completely at capacity, make sure the baby is safe and take yourself to the room, and then come back to it. In a moment when you are feeling more regulated, think about the situation and what was so triggering about it for
mm.
you. So often actually it's that not only are you exhausted, but actually you just kind of need a bit of a break, and you were really looking forward to that window of time of just, maybe sitting down or maybe being able to get something done in that time. And so when it vanishes, it's not just, oh, the baby isn't sleeping. It's like this complete loss of control over your life.
Yeah, totally. I've been there many times. And it's funny, it's so visceral that you can replicate that feeling again. You feel like I can feel those feelings that I had many years ago. It just stays with you, doesn't it? And it's very raw, and it's something that is, I think, is another reason for mothers to um reach out to people. This is why we do need help. This is why we do need others in our life. And it's not a sign of weakness or that we're, you know, coping much less than other mothers. We all need that. Yeah.
Yeah, and no one really prepares you for those kind of challenges. We have this very, as I said, this kind of sugar coated version of like what it will be like, and there are those moments, right? There are those blissful moments when they're so cute and they're so wonderful, and you can't believe they're here, and they're all bundled up and like looking so sweet. There, of course, there are those moments as well, but it just isn't the full picture. And I think when we keep on telling people that this is what the experience will be like, it will be 100% of this. Actually, it's really denying people the opportunity to kind of accept and validate their own feelings and be like, this is really hard right now. And I'm sure maybe in a couple of hours I'll have one of those really sweet moments again. But right now, this is really difficult.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
something I'm sure you're very, very familiar with as well is, because many women have babies later now and people often don't live close to their family, you're
Yeah.
often mothering in isolation. You've not got aunties, or perhaps you don't have your own mum or an older sister who's already had three kids. Like that, these people aren't around to help you and show you how it's done. In many cultures, they do the kind of 40 days, right? Like you basically just go to bed with your baby and everyone else does everything for you. What a great idea. But we don't do that here. It's like, oh, well,
Yeah.
you're out of hospital 3 days later. Well, you should be in the pub showing everyone the baby, and
Yeah.
it's all over now. You can have a nice time.
Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah,
It is
yeah,
crazy. Yeah, it is
yeah.
crazy.
I'm really privileged here to work with a lot of women that are from Singapore and Malaysia and India and Southeast Asia, where they do honour this postpartum period, and it's so refreshing to see. Generally their family, like parents or aunties, come over from their countries, and to witness something that I absolutely didn't have, and that's what inspired me to get into this work, is just seeing the real need for postpartum support. um, is so refreshing to actually witness it in action, where they are resting in bed, food is being cooked for them. I'm doing the belly binding or massage, or even bringing food or just support, and it's beautiful. And I just really wish that as a society, we started to value that a lot more. And as you said, I couldn't agree more, putting it into antenatal education, the realities, and not just the realities of, "Oh, this is how you bath your baby," or this is how many pooey nappies you want to see in a day, or, the real stuff, the stuff that matters. I always say the baby is going to be just fine if mum and dad or whoever is the primary caregivers are supported and nurtured and feel like their needs matter and they're valued, and the baby will be okay. It's a lot of mothers and fathers actually that I see do have very unrealistic expectations of what having a child actually is going to be like, and the fact that it's going to test you, it's going to test your relationship, it's going to change the dynamics for a little while. You're probably not going to be able to be spontaneous for a while. You're not going to get a full night's sleep. And it's such a rude shock. And I find it fascinating that we just don't know these things. It's just, yeah, it's really often the education is not there. And obviously we need the education because a lot of people haven't been around families. They haven't been around babies. So they don't understand, they haven't seen what it's like to have a baby for a 24-hour period. And it's such a shock. And I think that's when, things can happen because they're just like, I don't know what to do. And I'm shocked and I'm seeing my partner in a way that I don't like. And it's all becoming too much. Yeah. So seeking support as well is really good. And I actually think that all couples should have some counselling before they have a baby. I'm sure you agree with that. That would be ideal. And just to talk about some of the relationship changes. Yeah. And how, it doesn't have to be forever, but there will be shifts.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. And perhaps there's an absence of preparation about all these things because we're afraid, that if you kind of tell people what it's
Mm,
really like, maybe they think, well, I'll never have a baby, or you don't want to burst their bubble of like thinking it will just all be fine. Um, but actually, the more prepared you are, like you can't prepare for everything, right? You don't know what your birth's going to be like, or the temperament of your baby, or your recovery, or any of these things. But I don't think that these things should be such a shock to people, because ultimately, when they're a shock, I think what happens is people, they think that it's their fault and that they're the outlier and they're the one who is abnormal or not coping, right? Because the assumption is, well, everyone else is doing it like it said in the book and everyone else is absolutely fine. And actually, that's really, really problematic because people don't seek support. They tend to struggle silently for quite a long
Yes.
time. And we kind of have a maternal mental health crisis in the UK. I'm sure you probably do
Yeah.
in Australia where you
Yeah.
live. Um,
Yes.
and the
1 in
perinatal
5.
service, yeah,
It's 1 in 5, yeah.
yeah, it's
Mm.
very high, and the services
Mm.
are have been chronically underfunded and really need to be expanded. But there is also this huge gap in education. Um, so people aren't really coming forward early enough, um,
Yes.
saying actually, like, I don't think I feel so good. And something that I do find problematic on social media is that it is so extreme. I find you've got these like blissful versions of motherhood, influencers who have had a full face of makeup and their hair done on delivery day, and they're there. Here's the baby looking fabulous. A week later, they're wearing like a cream cashmere, uh, matching outfit at home, relaxing, and it all just looks dreamy. So you have this kind of completely unrealistic version of like what it's like. And then on the other side of it, there is so much um, kind of negativity as well in that motherhood sphere of the drudgery and the exhaustion and how terrible it is. That I think, although it's helpful to have these narratives, so people think, okay, well, other people are finding this hard as well. It almost normalizes it so much that when people are struggling, that they don't even recognize it. I know that I
Mm.
have that experience myself too. Sometimes it's like, well, it just is stressful. It's just a stressful situation. And yes, it can be stressful, but like there are certain markers that really suggest that maybe you need to get more support. So like maternal rage is such a good one. It is a really common experience, but actually, how frequently are you experiencing this? If this is happening to you like on a daily basis, it really suggests that you need some more support here, and actually maybe your mental health has really been impacted. um,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, so that would be kind of the differentiation between just normal moments of angry feelings to, okay, maybe this is becoming a little bit more of a
yes.
problem and we need to seek support.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
definitely. And I think some of the really key markers in that are how persistent are these feelings, how frequent
Mm.
are these feelings, and what's the impact on your overall life? Like, are you still enjoying things that you used to enjoy doing? Now, obviously, having a baby, it turns your world upside down, and a lot of the hobbies or interests that you might have had previously, there just aren't time for, or you're no longer interested in them. But are you still doing anything that is kind of bringing you joy or making you feel
Yeah.
calm? If every
Yeah.
day feels like a struggle, then that's not really something that you should have to tolerate without any help.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, and you're not alone in this as it's not something unique to you that you're doing a terrible job or you're not coping because something's wrong with you. It does happen and it's only like we were saying like really we should all have more help. So it's a big job to do alone.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely, and
Yeah.
and can be very disorientating. One of my favorite books on motherhood that I wish everybody could read is is a book called Motherhood: Facing and Finding Yourself by Lisa Marchiano. I don't know if you've come across it. It's
Yeah.
really one of my favorite books because it is not a book about how to be a better mother. It's basically a book about the kind of grittiness of the emotional experience of becoming a mum and how you've kind of got to um, kind of wade through it in a way until you come out the other side. But that doesn't mean that you have to wade through it alone. And
Mm.
it really is such a big transition, but it's also this incredible opportunity for like psychological and personal growth. I think one of the things that why people pleasing and good girl conditioning gets mentioned so much in motherhood is because it's usually the first time that many women become aware that they're doing it and start to think like, I actually don't want to live my life like this anymore.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and this no longer suits me to be like this. But
Yeah.
any change um, causes friction, and we know that when you're changing a relational dynamic, initially the other people don't really like it very much. So
Yeah.
it feels hard. It can feel really difficult for women who have been historically, very agreeable and people pleasing in their family. It can be a big surprise when they turn around and they say, "No, we're not coming for lunch. It takes us 3 hours to get there. So I'm
Yeah.
sorry. We'll see you another time."
Yeah. Totally. There's pushback. Yeah. But I definitely see it like you do. I often think of motherhood as an upgrade in life. We often talk about baby brain and so a lot of the changes in a negative way, like it's something that has dumbed you down, sort of thing. You're not capable anymore. You're different. You're limited. But it's not. It's such a change. It's such an opportunity with the neuroplasticity and things like this to really grow and really reinvent yourself. And I love that about motherhood. And I sort of talk about that from the rooftops that mums have an opportunity here to be the person that they've always meant to be and the person that they now want to be. And there will be a bit of pushback, but it's your life. And yeah, it's such a beautiful thing. I love that part of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and maybe that's really the kind of the crux of it. Of yes, these things are difficult, but if we prepare people, it also helps them with that opportunity
Yes.
of growth. And actually, that's like the antithesis of bounce back culture, right? Because bounce back culture is basically have a baby and pretend that you're the same person, just like with this
Yeah.
cute accessory, but the baby's not like a new handbag. It's like radically changed your whole existence.
Totally. You could never be that person again, and nor will you want to be that person again once you do sort of come out the other side and realize that you've grown into a person that truly now understands who you are, what you
Yeah.
value, what your priorities are, and all of
And the
that. Yeah.
grieving of the self that
Yeah.
you no longer are. I mean, I found from in my personal experience, my children were born very close together. My eldest was just 2 when the
Mm.
twins were born, so I've kind of like done everything at accelerated speed. It just happened that way. It wasn't necessarily the plan.
Mm.
But one of the things I found is that I didn't really kind of grieve my previous life with my
Yeah.
firstborn.
Yeah.
I think I was so like immersed in motherhood and caring for him. And and then I was pregnant with the twins, which was a very challenging pregnancy. And it was really only you probably when the twins turned 1 and they're almost 2 that I kind of took stock a bit and really realized like that part of my life is like a closed chapter now, and
Yeah.
there's many other chapters to come, but also acknowledging like that version of myself doesn't exist anymore. I'm not going to go back to that. There might be times when I have glimpses of that when I go out with my friends or I go away without my children for a brief period of time, but fundamentally I am not that version of myself anymore, and I never will be again.
Yes. Yes. So, in these few years, Joanna, what have you noticed? Maybe something in yourself that your children have taught you that you perhaps wasn't as visible before?
Well, my children have definitely shown me that I am inherently less patient than than I
We
initially
all feel that way. Yeah.
initially thought. But I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned from them is about kind of letting go of control and being more flexible and more fluid. I would still not describe myself as like a really flexible person. Like that takes work for me, but it has made me loosen my grip on things much more. In particular, having twins, I think you
Mm,
have to lean into that to an extent because it is quite a challenge having twins.
yes. I haven't
Um,
got 3 sets of hands that I can see.
yeah,
So
and I'm
there's
at
some things you've got
motherhood
to let go of. Yeah.
with my own children, and when I pick them up at the end of the day, when I've been working and they've been one's at preschool, the other two are now in nursery a few days a week. They all want me, but there's only one of me, and they don't want to share
Yeah.
me. They're kind of
Yeah.
they're fighting. A friend of mine who I worked with many years ago, she actually also had twins. Her children are much older than mine now. I remember her telling me that her children taught her so much more than she ever taught them, and I think that's really true.
Absolutely. I say that too. Yeah, definitely. And it's such a gift.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When we see it that way. Yeah. So, what would you like to tell other mothers? What would you like them to know, perhaps when they're pregnant, about the mother role? I know that that's a very big question, but what comes to mind straight away?
Really, that you will always be doing so much better than you think you're doing, and that you're giving yourself credit for, and that um, motherhood is inherently much more emotionally complicated than anyone will ever tell you before you have a baby. But that isn't
Mm,
about
that's very reassuring. Yeah, I like that. Yeah, we're very much inclined to see what we're not doing, aren't we? But honestly, like when we really look back, we're doing a lot.
yeah, and
Yeah.
there's many ways to do things. Like there really isn't a right way. And I think it's a combination of finding your feet and your own confidence as a mother, and also the temperament of your child. So much
Mm,
advice is so blanket, and it's just not helpful. Even the other day, like, I saw something online about like attachment parenting still gets um a lot of kind of press and praise, and like, whilst I think obviously you want to have a healthy attachment with your child, but carrying your baby in a baby carrier all day is sometimes dictated by your baby, rather than it being like this is the way that it works for everybody. Some people have babies that just won't be put down, and not by choice they're in the carrier the whole time. Mine hated the carrier. They never wanted to be in it. They were just like, "Arr," and all like kind of crushed in and like not comfortable. And when we absorb these ideas as like so dictatorial that there is one way to do something, I think people feel that they're always falling short. And actually, there's many different ways to sleep, there's many different ways to feed, and you have to find what works for you and your family and what suits your baby. And if you can get the two of those things aligned together, you're probably going to be happier overall as a family. And that's going to look different for everybody.
yes, absolutely. And I always say it's a relationship with our child. So it's not a one size fits all. And we're not going to find out overnight what our child's needs are and their temperament. It's going to take time and patience, just like any relationship, to really get to know them and what they're asking of us. And I think that's another thing, just giving yourself some grace of we're going to do some things that aren't going to work, and that's okay too, because we're both learning on the job. We're learning together, and that's okay. Yeah, yeah. So, if you could gift a mother anything in the world, what would it be?
Hmm. I think it would be the gift of sleep, because
Yeah.
it is elusive for so many. and and that is sleep has such a huge impact on really how capable you feel in the day and your emotional resilience, and I wish more people would be kinder to themselves about that. If you're getting very broken sleep, stop expecting yourself to function as if you were getting 8 solid hours a night.
Mm,
Um, But that would be my gift because it really does change how you feel.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that's very close to your heart. Sleep, probably something you're forever chasing as well. Yeah.
My twins
Yeah.
were quite good sleepers when they were little, actually, which made twins a bit more manageable. As they've got older, when you've got three children, it's like the chances of a night when no one's waking become very slim.
Absolutely, yeah. And then they become teenagers and you're still awake because you're waiting for them to come home.
Yeah. I mean, my own mother did say to me once, the thing is when you have children, you will never really sleep again. And
You'll
maybe,
never sleep again
maybe
properly,
it's
sadly. You will. Don't worry, mums, you will. Yeah, but it's such a journey, and I think this conversation has really brought back to mind just that need for kindness and self compassion and understanding that this is a huge task. It's a mammoth task, and there's lots of layers to what brings us into our motherhood. And we carry things from our own childhood, and we bring that in, and from our own parents, and then of course, as we've said, the temperament of the child, and we're all learning, and it's big. And just sit back and feel, I've done good today.
yeah,
I've done okay. We've got through the day. Everyone's alive. They're fed. We've been attentive to them 30% of the time, so we've done really well. Yeah.
I
So
agree.
thank you so much for your expertise and just your soft approach to explaining all these things to us. You're very easy to listen to, Joanna, and we appreciate the work that you're doing in the UK. Where can people find you?
So I am on Instagram at Dr. underscore Joanna underscore psych. Not the catchiest one, but you can find me there where I post about motherhood. I also have a website, which is www.drjoannaharvey.com, and you can sign up to my newsletter there where I write about interesting things that I have read or listened to or thoughts I have on the psychology of motherhood.
Perfect. I'll put all of that in the show notes. Yeah, that's been a really great conversation, and thank you for sharing everything that you have. Um, look forward to chatting in the future.
Yeah, it's been lovely to talk to you today, Katura. Thanks so much for having me on.
And that it offered something helpful to your own mothering experience. If you are a pregnant woman or know someone who is, head over to my website to receive your free copy of the postpartum checklist and contact list. And if you'd like to be better prepared for your postpartum, both practically and mentally, purchase the Peaceful Postpartum ebook, a 52-page interactive guide on what you need to know and what matters most in postpartum. And so that we can get these conversations out to more mothers, I'd be grateful if you could like, share, and review this podcast, and we'll see you next time.